A function is essentially a block of code that you're going to reuse within your application. In JavaScript, to declare a function, first you just type function as a keyword, and then you want to name your function. So we're going to just name our function reset. You'll see why in a minute. And then you do a set of parentheses. Later, we're going to add arguments to our function, but for now, we're going to just have no arguments, so just empty parentheses, and then have curly braces. And the curly braces are going to contain the block of code that you're going to want to run more than once. For the sake of time, I have prepared some of the initial setup code ahead of time. I have 3 numerical variables, a, b, and c. They're set to 0, 1, and 2. Then I have this function reset, which you can see inside my block here. It's just going to set a back to 0, b back to 1, and c back to 2. Then I'm going to increment a, b, and c. And then finally, we're just going to print out a, b, and c. They should all be 1 higher than their initial value. So we're going to just go ahead and run this. And yes, we have a is 1, b is 2, and c is 3. Let's go ahead and run our reset function after doing this. To execute or run a function, you just type the name of the function, and then you put the parentheses, and that's it. If there's no arguments needed, then this will just run this function. So now you would expect this to be a, b, and c, and then back to their initial values. And here we are. Yep, a is 0, b is 1, and c is 2. Now, one thing you should be aware of when working with functions is the idea of a local variable. Within a function, it's able to see variables that are outside the function. But if you declare a variable within the function itself, that variable will only be available to that function. So if I have within my reset and I say like var d equals 3, and then I have like console.log d, I would expect this to be an error because like this d is not accessible outside of the reset function. So let's go ahead and run this, just see how it goes. And yeah, so uncaught reference, d is not defined because d is just a local variable. Now, one thing you should be aware of is that you can have things name the same thing. It's definitely something you should avoid, but if I did like var a equals 0, this is going to be a local a. This isn't going to be like the a that's like the top level. So if I run this, a won't actually be reset back to 0. So let's go ahead and run it and see how it goes. And yeah, so after this, a is incremented, but then after running reset, a is still going to be 1 because it's not like the outer a. It's just like the local a is set to 0, and that's not really what we're going for. Now you might be wondering, why use a function at all? Why not just copy and paste? Why not just do a equals 0, b equals 1, c equals 2 instead of doing reset? And you totally could do that. You totally could just copy and paste this every single time, and you do that instead of reset. But there's a few reasons why you shouldn't do this. First off, it's just a lot more code. In general, you want to write as little code as you can. It's just going to be a lot easier for you to go back and understand what you did. It's going to be a lot easier for other people to look at your code and understand what you did. But most importantly, you just really want to avoid duplicate code as much as you can. It's considered to be a bad code smell, which is just an indication that the code isn't written as well as it should be. And the problem with duplicate code is, let's say I have reset that's 10 times throughout my application, but then I want to make a change. Like, let's say, okay, C's initial value is going to be 3 instead. Now, if I'm using just my reset function here instead of this, I will only have to change this in the one spot, and then we're good to go. If I'm just copying and pasting, I will have to find that everywhere, every time I wanted to reset, and then manually set that to 3. It's just going to be a lot more difficult to maintain. And if you're working on a team, the chance of them knowing all the places that you've used this, or even if it's just you, like a year down the line, it's not going to happen. Like, you're definitely going to miss one, and like the bigger the application, like the worse it's going to get. So really, when you're programming, anytime you see yourself duplicating code, like more than like twice, I would say it's time to just like sit back and be like, okay, it's time to write a function. And even if things are just similar, like if it's not like exactly the same, it's like just try to write a function and just have a way for the function to determine how things are different. Now, so far, I have only shown this function reset, which doesn't take in any arguments and also doesn't return anything. You will have functions like this, but I would say more often than not, you're going to have functions that both take in arguments and have a return value. So let's say instead of having reset, let's have a function that finds out of 3 variables which one is the largest. So in this function, we have just function and largest var, so that's the name of the function, just as before. And then within our parentheses, we have 3 different variables separated by parentheses, and these are our arguments. So this is basically saying, if you want to run this function, you need to pass it in 3 different variables, x, y, and z, and it will return whichever one is the largest. So when a function hits a return statement, whatever is after that is returned to the caller, and then the function just stops right there. Like it just leaves that function and the rest is just ignored. So here we are going to run largest var with a, b, and c. Now this is kind of like algebra where it's like a is going to go in and be x when it's in this function. And then b is going to go in as y, and then c is going to go in as z. So if we run this, we would expect c is the largest, so c is going to be our z value. So this should just return c, which will be 3. So if we do console.log largest var, we're going to expect this to just be 3. Okay, and that is what we got. JavaScript is considered weakly typed. And what this means is this function, it doesn't say what type of variable it's going to return, and it doesn't say what types the arguments need to be. It basically trusts the programmer to use the correct types. This gives you some flexibility, but also you can run into problems if you pass in the wrong argument type. So just as an example, I'm going to show what this will look like if you were going to write it in Java. In Java, you have to say what type the function is going to return. So it's int largest var. So int is going to be a integer value. And then our arguments are also int x, int y, and int z. So you can't just accidentally pass a string, you can't pass a character, you can't pass, some weird object. You have to pass 3 different integers, otherwise you're going to get an error. In our first function, we had reset, which was just a function that took in no variables and it returned nothing. In Java, if you're going to write a function that returns nothing, you have to name it void. So you'll say void reset. And then within here, we'll just write, whatever reset would do in Java. So that's just something that's like a little bit different in strongly typed languages. It's something you should be aware of in JavaScript. And yeah, that's all I have to say about functions in JavaScript. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Or if you have any video suggestion, I'll try to help out anyone else that needs help. And thanks. I hope you have a great day.